It is time for us to arise, and it is time for us to shine. Maybe we are shining, but not to the level which the Lord wants to take us in our lives. The Lord wants us to arise to a higher level of where we are in our lives at this moment. And the Lord wants us to shine with a greater light that is within us. And today's message was inspired by an episode of The Chosen which I was watching with my family and friends yesterday, and it is so blessed to watch it as a Christian fellowship, because you pray about it and you discuss it and it becomes much more meaningful. And it was about Lazarus, when Jesus rose Lazarus from the dead. And I want to just read a couple of verses from this passage of Jesus raising up Lazarus, which is found in John chapter 11. And verse 5 says, "Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus." So Jesus loves Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And the next verse says in verse 6, "So when he heard that he was sick," when Jesus heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. What's interesting, brothers and sisters, in this passage is at other times, when even it was about Gentiles or about Roman centurions or about other people who were sick, Jesus immediately rose up so that he can go and heal those people. But the people that Jesus loves, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, Jesus hears that Lazarus, his beloved, is sick. And he stays 2 more days in the place that he is. For others, Jesus raises up quicker and faster, but for the loved ones, he's slow to move. He's slow to move. And sometimes, brothers and sisters, when we go through experiences, and we experience the silence of God, and we have been praying and we have been asking the Lord, please help me through my infirmities, please help me through my calamities, Lord, help me through my distress, Lord, help me through what I am going through. And when we experience the silence of God, and when we do not hear the answer to our prayers, we find a place of weakness. We find ourselves in a place of darkness. But this passage is explaining to us for those whom Jesus loves, there's going to be a delay in the answers to prayers. But there is a reason for it. Although Jesus may be silent, although Jesus may have stayed there 2 days, the next verse says in verse 7, "Then after this he said to the disciples, let's go to Judea again." So even though God might be silent in our places of difficulties and perils and what we are going through, it doesn't mean that God has forgotten us. For sure, the glory that we will experience after the trials that we have gone through, and the Lord has answered our prayers, maybe in a delayed time, the glory that we are going to be experiencing is going to be much more greater for those people. For those people who love the Lord, they go through more suffering, but the answer to their prayers will bring a greater blessing and a greater glory in their lives. So Jesus decides now he has to go to Judea again. And verse 8 says, "Then the disciples said to him, Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, and you are going there again?" In the series Chosen, it's a beautiful, I don't agree with everything or all the theology, but they are doing such an amazing job of depicting the human side of Jesus, and they're doing an amazing job which nobody has done till date before. And in the previous episode we saw the stoning of Jesus, and it was, when you hear things like that and it touches you, but when you see it enacted out there, there is a deeper level of understanding, and you see that the people had so much, for those who portray the truth, for those who claim the truth, they are so hated that they are even stoned. And now Jesus faces this calamity. They tried to stone Jesus, and the disciples are saying, Jesus, there's danger, there's difficulty. And we know for a fact that the Father has told Jesus, go and raise up Lazarus from the dead, after he has been dead for 4 days. So we know that Jesus has been given a task by the Father, but the task requires going through a difficult period, going through a dangerous way. The task is not easy. It even means that Jesus faces the danger of death by stoning. And the work that the Lord has given you and me, brothers and sisters, the work that the Lord has given you and me also requires us to go through a dangerous period in our life. The path is not going to be simple. The path is not going to be easy. The path is not going to be straightforward. There's going to be many twists and turns and difficulties and whatnot. And we have to be ready. If we want to hear the voice of God and follow it and do what the Lord has called us to do, we have to be ready to be able to face the difficulties in our path. Now, what I'm most interested in this video series titled Arise and Shine is the answer. So Jesus, many a times, people tell me, Alan, why don't you give a straightforward answer? Maybe I'm a true disciple of Jesus, because people ask me straightforward questions, but my answers are always some sort of a riddle or never very straightforward. And Jesus gives a fascinating answer to this question of why the rabbi is willing to face the danger. And Jesus answers in verse 9, Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles, because the light is not in him. So Jesus is saying, look, there's danger, but I'm going to go in the daytime, everything is going to be okay. Well, the Pharisees and the scribes and the religious leaders tried to stone Jesus in the daylight, isn't it? And we know Jesus is talking about light over here. Jesus is talking about light over here. But we know this is a different kind of light, because how does he end up? He says, because the light is not in him. This is not an outer, although it may seem like Jesus is talking about the 12 hours of the day when there is daylight, but this is a different light. This is a different light that Jesus is talking about. And we want to understand what light is Jesus talking about. Now, in the Old Testament, we find a lot of prophecies about Jesus, and especially we find prophecies in Isaiah. So we want to see this prophecy in Isaiah, this chapter about Jesus, Isaiah chapter 9, in which in verse 6 it says, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. The government will be upon his shoulders, and his name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. So this chapter is about the prophecy of Jesus, and this very chapter in verse 2 says, the people who walked in darkness. So now we are trying to understand what this light is. Jesus says, if you walk in the daytime, if you walk in the light, everything is okay. Now this is about following the calling, following the thing that the Lord has called us to do in our lives, and we are facing a dangerous path, or we are facing the difficulties of our lives, and it says the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them a light has shined. So, brothers and sisters, what is this light? Well, let me put it in another way. Actually, who is this light? And the light is Jesus Christ Himself. Jesus has shined in our hearts, and where there was darkness, I loved the monologue in the end of the episode about darkness, and it starts with this wonderful line: darkness is not the absence of light. That would be too simple, but actually it is much more sinister than that. It is a void, and we all have a void in us. And only the Lord can fulfill that void. Only the Lord can fill that void. And we see that what is that light? That light is Christ shining in us. That light is Jesus shining in us. What does all this mean? When Jesus is saying, look, we have to go to Judea because that's what the Father has told me to do. Now let's take that for our lives. We are called to do certain tasks in our lives, but those tasks are extremely difficult. In my life, where I am present at the moment, we are closing down both our businesses, and we are dedicating our lives only to the service of the kingdom of God, of making videos, of preaching and writing books. And this is a very difficult task for us, because we do not know where our provision will come from and where our sustenance will come from. But we know the task that the Lord has given us to do, to proclaim the gospel, to proclaim His word throughout the world using digital means. And this is a difficult path for us, and we have to walk in this light which the Lord has called us to do, and the Lord is calling you also to do the same. But what does this actually mean? What does it mean that you and me, brothers and sisters, have to face the difficulties of life, have to face the difficulty of life to be able to walk in light? We shall see this in more detail in part 2. God bless you.